The engineer slammed his fist on the conference table and pointed directly at the 17-year-old girl in the wheelchair. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this chair. We've run every diagnostic. We've checked every specification. The problem isn't our engineering. The problem is your daughter. Maybe if she tried harder to adapt instead of complaining, she wouldn't be in pain. Destiny Stone sat frozen, tears streaming down her face, while a man in a $3,000 suit told her father that she was defective. Victor Reaper Stone, vice president of the Detroit Hells Angels, watched this stranger blame his little girl for 2 years of suffering she'd never once complained about. His hands curled into fists, his jaw locked tight. Every instinct screamed at him to reach across that table and show this engineer what real pain felt like. But he didn't, because violence wouldn't fix Destiny's wheelchair. Violence wouldn't take away her pain. So Reaper did something he'd never done before. He walked away. He loaded his daughter into their van, and he started searching for someone who would actually listen. That search would lead 95 Hells Angels to a crumbling garage in Detroit. That search would reveal why a broke black mechanic with a busted knee could see what million-dollar California engineers refused to see. And that search would change everything for everyone involved. Before we continue, if you love stories about everyday heroes who risk everything to do what's right, please subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Watch this story all the way to the end and comment the name of your city so I can see how far this incredible journey has traveled around the world. Now let me take you back to where the real story begins. Part 1. The Collision. Marcus Mack Washington's phone rang at 4:47 in the morning. He grabbed it from the nightstand, his left knee screaming as he shifted in bed. The pain never let him forget. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 8 years keeping soldiers alive by keeping their vehicles running. An IED that ended his military career and gave him a limp he'd carry forever. "Washington Auto and Cycle," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Mac, it's Jerome from the tow company. I need you right now." "Jerome, the sun isn't even up yet." I know, but listen to me. There's a Harley broken down on I-94. The owner specifically asked for you, by name. Said he heard you're the best black mechanic in Detroit, and he doesn't trust anyone else with his bike." Mac sat up slowly. "He asked for me specifically, by name Mac. And brother, this ain't a regular customer. This is Hells Angels, vice president of the Detroit chapter. The man looks like he eats nails for breakfast. But he was real clear. Said someone at the VA told him you see things other mechanics miss." Mac was already reaching for his work pants. "Where on I-94? Mile marker 187. And Mac, be careful. These ain't the kind of people you want to disappoint." 23 minutes later, Mac's beat-up Ford pickup pulled onto the highway shoulder. His headlights cut through the darkness and illuminated a scene that made every survival instinct he'd developed in Afghanistan start screaming. The motorcycle was a custom Harley-Davidson worth more than Mac made in 3 years. Chrome so polished it looked like liquid silver even in the dim light. But standing next to it was a man who made the bike look small. Victor Reaper Stone stood 6 feet 4 inches tall. His shoulders were broad enough to fill a doorway. His leather vest displayed patches that told stories Mac could only imagine. His beard was salt and pepper, his hair pulled back tight. And even at 5 in the morning, he wore dark sunglasses that hid his eyes completely. Mac parked behind the motorcycle and stepped out, grabbing his tool bag. His limp was always worse in the cold morning air, and he saw Reaper's head turn slightly, tracking the uneven movement. "You're Mac Washington." The voice was deep, controlled. The voice of a man who never needed to shout because people listened when he spoke quietly. "That's me. Jerome said your bike died on you." "Started making a sound about 2 miles back. Then it just quit." Mac approached the Harley and knelt beside it, his knee protesting loudly. He'd learned a long time ago to ignore that kind of pain. Pain was just information. You noted it and kept working. Mind starting it for me? I need to hear what it's doing. Reaper mounted the bike and turned the key. The engine cranked, but wouldn't catch. Mac closed his eyes and listened. Really listened, the way he'd learned to listen in the desert when missing a problem meant soldiers didn't come home. There, a tiny hesitation in the cranking pattern. A slight irregularity that 99 mechanics out of 100 would never notice. Try it again. Reaper turned the key. Same result. Mac opened his eyes. When did you last have the fuel system serviced? 6 months ago. Dealership in Dearborn. They charged me $800 and said everything was perfect. They checked the fuel pressure regulator. They said it was fine. Mac pulled a small diagnostic device from his bag. He'd built it himself from scrapped military equipment, modified it to work on civilian vehicles. He connected it to the fuel rail and watched the readings climb. Then he watched them fall. It's not fine, Mac said, and he couldn't keep the edge out of his voice. Your fuel pressure drops 40% when the pump engages. The regulator has been failing for months. That dealership charged you $800 and missed a problem I found in 3 minutes. Reaper was silent for a long moment. Then he removed his sunglasses. His eyes were gray, hard. The eyes of a man who'd seen violence and understood it intimately. Can you fix it? I've got a universal regulator in my truck. Won't be the exact right part, but I can make it work. That's what I do. I make things work when other people say they can't. Mac retrieved the part and went to work. His hands moved with the precision he'd developed over 8 years in the military, where sloppy work got people killed. Reaper watched every movement, evaluating, assessing. 31 minutes later, Mac stood up. Try it now. The engine roared to life, smooth, powerful, perfect. Reaper let it run for a moment, then cut the ignition and turned to face Mac directly. What do I owe you? 100 for the part, 50 for the labor. I can do the permanent fix at my shop for another 200. Reaper reached into his vest and pulled out a roll of cash. He counted out $500 and held it toward Mac. That's too much. No, it isn't. Reaper's voice carried something new, something that sounded almost like respect. You found in 3 minutes what a dealership missed in 6 hours. You did it on the side of a highway in the dark with a homemade tool and a leg that's obviously causing you pain. You earned every dollar. Mac took the money slowly. Reaper studied him for another long moment. I heard something about you, Mac Washington. Heard you spent 8 years in the Army keeping vehicles running in Afghanistan. Heard you got hurt, and they sent you home. Heard you opened a shop in a neighborhood nobody cares about because you couldn't afford anywhere else. And heard that even though you're barely surviving, you still charge old ladies half price because you won't take food money from grandmothers. Mac said nothing. Everything Reaper said was true. I also heard something else. Reaper reached into his pocket and pulled out a plain white card with a phone number written in black ink. Heard you see things other mechanics don't see, things expensive equipment misses, things experts overlook. He held the card toward Mac. I might have another job for you, something more complicated than a fuel regulator, something where the equipment cost $45,000 and the experts swear nothing is wrong with it. His voice hardened with barely controlled fury. But something is wrong, and my daughter is the one paying the price for their blindness. Mac's hand tightened around the card. Your daughter, 17 years old, been in a wheelchair for 2 years. The chair was custom built by specialists in California. Best engineers money can buy. They ran every test, checked every specification, and they looked me in the eye and told me their chair is perfect. Reaper's jaw clenched. But my daughter is in pain, every single day. She doesn't complain because she's been told the equipment is flawless. She blames herself. She thinks her body is the problem. She thinks she's just not trying hard enough to adapt. The words hit Mac like a physical blow. He'd heard this exact story before. Soldiers at the VA given equipment that met every specification but didn't actually work for the person using it. Systems designed to pass tests instead of help people. When do you want me to look at it? Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Reaper handed him a second card with an address. And Mac, yeah. I'm trusting you with my daughter. I'm trusting you with her pain. Don't make me regret that trust. He started his motorcycle, the engine purring smoothly now, and pulled onto the highway. Mac watched the tail light disappear into the darkness. He looked down at the 2 cards in his hand. A phone number, an address, an invitation to challenge $45,000 worth of expert engineering. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. Marcus, God gave you hands that can heal machines. Don't you ever let fear stop you from using that gift. Mac climbed into his truck and drove toward home. He had a job to prepare for. The next morning, Mac pulled up to an address that made him check the GPS twice. The house was massive. Set back from the road behind iron gates that opened automatically when he approached. 3 motorcycles sat in a driveway that could have held 20 cars, and Mac recognized the Harley he'd fixed the night before. Before he could knock, the front door opened. Reaper stood there in jeans and a plain black t-shirt. Without the leather vest, he looked slightly less intimidating. Slightly. You're early. My mother always said early is on time and on time is late. Smart woman. Reaper stepped back. Destiny is waiting. She didn't sleep much last night. She's nervous. She's been disappointed before. Mac followed him through a house that told a story in photographs. A younger Reaper with a beautiful woman who must have been Destiny's mother. A little girl growing up in those pictures, smiling, running, dancing at a recital. Then the photographs changed. Hospital rooms, medical equipment, a teenage girl in a wheelchair still smiling but with eyes that carried weight no 17-year-old should carry. They entered a large room at the back of the house, and there, in the most advanced wheelchair Mac had ever seen, sat Destiny Stone. She had her father's gray eyes and delicate features that must have come from her mother. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore a faded t-shirt with Hitsville, USA printed across the front. She looked up from a book when they entered, and Mac saw it immediately. Hope. Desperate, barely contained hope. And underneath that hope, the fear that comes from being disappointed too many times. You're Mac Washington. Her voice was clear, but cautious. Dad said you fixed his bike on the highway. Said you found something nobody else could find. I got lucky. Dad doesn't believe in luck. He says luck is what lazy people call hard work and skill. Mac felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Smart man, your father. He thinks you can help me. Destiny's hands tightened on her armrests. Can you really, because other people have said they could help? Engineers from California, specialists from Boston, they all said they could fix whatever was wrong. But nothing is wrong with the chair. That's what they keep telling us. The chair is perfect. The specifications are exact. The engineering is flawless. Her voice cracked. So if nothing is wrong with the chair, then the problem must be me. Right. I must be doing something wrong. I must not be trying hard enough. I must be too weak or too sensitive or too something. Destiny. Mac moved closer, his bad leg protesting. Can I ask you a question? Okay. Not what the engineers say, not what the specialists think. I want to know what you feel. Where does it hurt? Destiny went completely still. Nobody ever asks me that. I'm asking. She stared at him for a long moment. Then her walls began to crack. My shoulders, they ache all the time. By the end of the day, I can barely lift my arms. Where else? My back. It feels like someone is pressing on my spine. Constant pressure. Never stops. Keep going. My knees hurt, which doesn't make sense because I can't even use my legs, but they throb, especially at night. What about the controls? Destiny held up her right hand. Mac saw calluses on her palm and fingers, thick, rough calluses that shouldn't exist on a 17-year-old girl. I have to push hard to make it respond. Really hard. The joystick is so stiff, but they said that's normal. They said I'll build up strength. It's been 2 years. 2 years of that, every single day. Mac felt anger building in his chest, hot and sharp and familiar. He'd felt this anger before watching soldiers suffer with equipment that met every specification while failing every practical test. Can I examine the chair? Destiny nodded quickly. Please. Please look at it. I don't care what you find. I just need someone to believe me. Mac circled the wheelchair slowly. His eyes moved over every joint, every weld, every connection. The chair was a masterpiece of engineering. Titanium frame, precision joints, LED diagnostic panels. This wasn't medical equipment. This was art. Expensive, beautiful, catastrophically wrong art. He saw it within 60 seconds. The battery pack sat in the front of the frame. 47 pounds of lithium cells pulling the center of gravity forward. That placement looked good on engineering diagrams. It maximized structural stability metrics. It probably impressed every review board and regulatory committee. But it forced Destiny's spine to curve backward to maintain balance. 2 years of constant spinal compensation. No wonder her back never stopped hurting. The wheels were aligned 2 degrees off parallel, perfect within manufacturing tolerances, insignificant on paper. But 2 degrees meant constant correction with every movement. Her shoulders were doing overtime work every single moment she spent in that chair. The joystick sensitivity was set low for precision control. Great for someone with tremors who needed stable, deliberate inputs. Terrible for a teenage girl with normal motor function who just wanted to move through her world. She was fighting the controls instead of using them. And the seat. Designed to meet FDA pressure distribution requirements, engineered to pass clinical testing, built for a hypothetical average body that didn't exist in real life. The support points didn't match Destiny's actual body. She was developing pressure damage without even knowing it. Mac straightened up. Mr. Stone, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. Reaper's eyes narrowed. Say it. The engineers who built this chair are probably brilliant. They probably have degrees from the best universities and decades of experience. They probably won awards for this design. And they built a chair that is perfect by every objective measure and completely wrong for your daughter. The room went silent. The weight distribution is backward. The wheel alignment is off. The control sensitivity is miscalibrated. The seat geometry doesn't match her body. Every single problem she described is real. Every single pain she feels is legitimate. And every single expert who told her the problem was in her head was wrong. Destiny made a sound. Half sob, half laugh. Tears poured down her face. I'm not crazy, she whispered. I'm not making it up. The pain is real. The pain is real, Mac confirmed. And it was never your fault. Reaper hadn't moved. His jaw was clenched so tight Mac could see veins standing out in his neck. 2 years, Reaper said, and his voice was barely controlled. My daughter has been suffering for 2 years, and every specialist I paid, every expert I trusted, every engineer who looked at that chair, they all told me the same thing. The chair is perfect. Destiny needs to try harder. his hands curled into fists. They blamed my little girl. They made her think she was the problem. They took my money, and they blamed my child for their failure. They were wrong, Mac said simply. The question now is what we do about it. Can you fix it? The question hung in the air. Mac looked at the wheelchair. $45,000 of precision engineering. State-of-the-art technology. The best that money could buy. And he was a broke mechanic with a failing shop in a neighborhood nobody cared about. But he'd spent 8 years keeping soldiers alive by seeing what others missed. He'd rebuilt engines in sandstorms. He'd fabricated parts from scrap when supply lines failed. He'd learned that expertise wasn't about degrees or expensive equipment. It was about caring enough to look closely and think creatively. I can fix it, Mac said, but I need to take it to my shop. I need to disassemble it completely and rebuild the core systems. The weight distribution needs to be redesigned. The wheels need to be realigned from scratch. The controls need to be recalibrated. The seat needs to be rebuilt for her specific body, not some theoretical average. How long? 24 hours. Reaper studied him. Those gray eyes evaluated every micro-expression, searching for doubt, for uncertainty, for any sign that Mac was overselling his abilities. And if you're wrong, if you make it worse, then I'll answer for it. But I'm not wrong. I've spent my whole life listening to machines. I know when something is broken, and I know when something is built wrong. That chair is built wrong, and I can make it right. Reaper turned to his daughter. Destiny, what do you think? She looked at Mac with tears still wet on her cheeks. But behind those tears was something stronger than pain. Hope. Real hope, the kind that comes from finally being heard. I think he's the first person in 2 years who asked me what was wrong instead of telling me I was wrong. Reaper nodded once. Take the chair. You have 24 hours. If you can do what you say, you'll have earned something more valuable than money. But if you fail my daughter... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Mac helped Destiny transfer to a basic wheelchair Reaper brought from another room. As he lifted her, he felt how light she was, how fragile, how much trust she was placing in a stranger. He loaded the custom wheelchair into his truck. As he pulled away, he could see Reaper and Destiny in his rearview mirror, standing in the driveway watching him go. They were betting everything on him. A father's hope, a daughter's future. The chance to prove that caring about people mattered more than credentials or money. Mac pressed the accelerator. He had 24 hours to prove them right. What Mac didn't know was that Reaper had already made a phone call. Word was spreading through the Hells Angels network. The vice president had found a black mechanic who claimed he could see what California engineers couldn't see, who said the $45,000 chair was wrong, who promised to fix in 24 hours what specialists had failed to fix in 2 years. By tomorrow morning, 95 motorcycles would roll toward Mac's garage. 95 brothers ready to witness either a miracle or hold someone accountable for giving false hope to a suffering child. But all Mac knew in that moment was that a 17-year-old girl had hidden a note inside her wheelchair cushion. He'd found it 20 minutes into his disassembly. A small piece of paper folded twice tucked, where no one would ever see it. 4 words in careful handwriting. Someone please help. It hurts. Mac pinned that note to the wall above his workbench right next to the photograph of his army unit. Then he got to work. The garage was cold. The fluorescent lights flickered. His knee screamed every time he knelt beside the workbench. None of that mattered. What mattered was that a girl had been crying for help for 2 years and nobody had heard her. What mattered was that experts had blamed her instead of listening to her. What mattered was that Mac had 24 hours to do what money and credentials and fancy degrees had failed to do. He disassembled the wheelchair completely. Every bolt, every joint, every electronic connection laid out in systematic order. His military training took over. Organization was survival. When you rebuilt something under pressure, you couldn't afford to lose a single component. The battery pack came out first. He set it on his scale, 47 pounds, exactly as he'd estimated. He examined the mounting points and confirmed what his instincts had told him. The engineers had prioritized structural stability over human comfort. The machine was perfect. The person using it was an afterthought. Mac had spent his whole career fighting against that kind of thinking. Soldiers weren't afterthoughts. Veterans weren't afterthoughts. And Destiny Stone damn sure wasn't an afterthought. He worked through the night. The wheel assemblies came apart, and he found the alignment issue exactly where he expected it. Manufacturing tolerances within spec, but real-world performance compromised. 2 degrees of misalignment. Such a small number. 2 years of shoulder pain. The joystick calibration took longer. The control system was sophisticated, designed for precision, but precision without responsiveness was useless for someone who just wanted to move naturally. Around midnight, Mac sat back against the wall and stared at the disassembled components spread across his workbench. Could he really do this? The doubt crept in like poison. He was a broke mechanic with a failing business. These engineers had degrees from Stanford and MIT. They had millions of dollars of equipment. They had decades of experience and international recognition. Who was he to say they were wrong? His eyes found the photograph on the wall. 5 soldiers in desert camouflage. Mac on the left, younger both legs working a smile that didn't carry weight yet. 3 of those men hadn't come home, but their equipment had been ready. Every vehicle Mac touched ran perfectly. Every system he maintained worked exactly as it should. Not because he had fancy degrees, because he cared enough to look closely. Because he understood that machines served people, not the other way around. His eyes moved to the note beside the photograph. "Someone please help. It hurts." Mac stood up. His knee screamed. His back ached. His hands were cut and covered in grease. He got back to work. The battery relocation required custom fabrication. Mac didn't have the specialized equipment the engineers used. He had a welder, a grinder, and 30 years of experience making things work with whatever was available. He repositioned the battery pack toward the rear of the frame, redistributing the weight so Destiny's spine could rest in its natural curve. He used lightweight aluminum bracing to compensate for the structural changes. When he finished, the chair was 12 pounds lighter and perfectly balanced. The wheel alignment took 3 hours of precision adjustment. He measured, adjusted, measured again. 7 measurements before a single modification. Sophie's shoulders depended on getting this exactly right. He rebuilt the control system from scratch, increasing joystick sensitivity until the chair would respond to the lightest touch. No more death grip, no more calluses, no more fighting just to move. The seat was the hardest part. Mac didn't have medical-grade materials, but he had memory foam from a high-end motorcycle seat he'd salvaged months ago. He had gel packs designed for long-haul truckers. He had the knowledge of how bodies actually worked under sustained pressure. He rebuilt the seat for Destiny specifically, not for some average patient in a clinical study, for a 17-year-old girl who lived in this chair 16 hours a day. Every support point positioned for her body. Every cushion layer designed for her weight distribution. 5:30 in the morning. Mac stepped back and looked at what he'd created. The wheelchair wasn't as beautiful as before. His modifications were visible. Carbon fiber bracing. Repositioned components. Rebuilt seat that didn't match the original aesthetic. But when he pushed it across the garage floor, it glided like it was floating. The wheels tracked perfectly parallel. The controls responded to a breath of pressure. The balance point sat exactly where a human body would naturally rest. Mac sat down on his stool. His body had moved beyond exhaustion into something that felt like floating. His hands were covered in cuts. His knee felt like broken glass. His back might never forgive him. But for the first time in 2 years, Destiny Stone was going to know what freedom felt like. He allowed himself 10 minutes of rest. Just 10 minutes with his eyes closed, breathing slowly, letting his heart rate settle. Then the rumbling started. Distant at first, like thunder on the horizon. But it grew louder and louder, and Mac's eyes snapped open because he knew that sound. Motorcycles, dozens of them, coming closer. He walked to the garage door and looked out into the gray morning light. What he saw made his blood freeze. They came around the corner like a leather-clad army, chrome glinting in the dawn, engines thundering in perfect synchronization, formation riding that spoke of military precision and absolute discipline. 10 motorcycles, 20, 30, 50. They kept coming. Mac stopped counting at 70. They filled his parking lot, spilled onto the street, surrounded his garage like predators circling wounded prey. 95 motorcycles. 95 Hell's Angels. 95 men who had come to witness either a miracle or a reckoning. And leading them all dismounting with the deliberate movements of a man who had done this many times before was Victor Reaper Stone. Mac's heart hammered against his ribs. His hands started to shake. This wasn't what he'd expected. He'd thought Reapers would come alone, maybe with a few brothers. Not this. Not an army. Reaper walked toward the garage. His brothers parted around him like water around a stone. His face was completely unreadable behind dark sunglasses, and his hands hung loose at his sides. He stopped 10 feet from where Mac stood. "Where is it?" No greeting, no small talk, just 3 words that carried the weight of everything. Mac stepped aside and gestured toward the workbench. "I kept my promise." Reaper walked past him into the garage. His brothers followed, filling the small space with leather and chrome and the smell of exhaust and engine oil. They surrounded the wheelchair, examining it from every angle. Some knelt to look at the modifications. Others hung back and watched Mac with expressions that revealed nothing. Reaper circled the chair slowly. His hand stayed behind his back. His head tilted as he examined every change, every modification, every departure from the original design. 5 minutes passed. 10. The silence was suffocating. Finally, Reaper looked at Mac. "Talk me through it." Mac explained everything. The weight redistribution, the wheel alignment, the control sensitivity, the seat redesign. He used technical language but didn't talk down. These men understood machines. They could hear the difference between knowledge and bullshit. When he finished, Reaper was silent for a long moment. "Destiny's in the van. Time to see if you're everything you claim to be." One of the bikers jogged to a black van at the edge of the lot. The side door opened and a wheelchair lift descended with a mechanical whine. Destiny Stone appeared in the doorway. She wore the same Motown t-shirt. Her eyes were red from crying or not sleeping or both. Her hands gripped the armrests of the basic wheelchair with white-knuckled intensity. Reaper helped her transfer to the modified chair. Every biker watched in absolute silence as she settled into the rebuilt seat. Destiny's eyes went wide immediately. "It's different," she whispered. "It feels completely different." "Try moving," Mac said. She reached for the joystick. Her fingers barely touched it. The wheelchair responded instantly. Destiny gasped. She pushed forward, and the chair glided smoothly across the concrete. She turned, and the wheels tracked perfectly. She moved backward, and her shoulders didn't scream in protest. She stopped in the middle of the parking lot. Her body was shaking. Tears poured down her face. But she was laughing. Oh my God. Her voice broke into something between a sob and a scream of joy. Oh my God, I forgot. I forgot what this was supposed to feel like. I forgot what it felt like to not hurt. She moved again, faster now, more confident, spinning in circles, racing across the pavement. Her laughter echoed off the garage walls and the assembled motorcycles and the hard faces of 95 Hells Angels who were watching a 17-year-old girl remember what freedom felt like. When she finally stopped in front of Mac, her face was soaked with tears, but split by the widest smile he had ever seen. "You heard me," she said. "You actually heard me. Everyone else said the chair was fine and I was the problem. But you listened. You believed me. You were never the problem, Destiny. It was always the chair. It was always them. It was never you." Reaper stood beside his daughter. His sunglasses were off now. His eyes were wet. The most dangerous man Mac had ever met stood there with tears threatening to fall because his little girl could finally move without pain. 2 years, Reaper said. His voice was rough, broken. She suffered for 2 years because experts couldn't admit they were wrong, because specialists cared more about their specifications than about my daughter, because engineers built something to impress review boards instead of to help a teenage girl. He stepped toward Mac. You saw what they couldn't see. You fixed what they wouldn't fix. You gave my daughter her life back. Reaper extended his hand. Mac took it. The grip was firm, not threatening, something else entirely, something that felt like brotherhood. You're one of us now, Mac Washington. Shelley Reaper's voice carried across the parking lot. Whether you want to be or not, your family. The bikers erupted, clapping, whistling, shouting approval. They surged forward, clapping Mac on the shoulders, shaking his hand, nodding their respect. Destiny rolled her wheelchair up beside him and grabbed his arm. This isn't over, she said. You know that, right? This is just the beginning. Mac looked at her, at Reaper, at 95 Hells Angels, who had just accepted a broke black mechanic from Detroit as one of their own. What do you mean? Reaper smiled. It was the first time Mac had seen him smile, and it transformed his face completely. My daughter isn't the only one suffering, Mac. There are 157 disabled veterans in this city alone. Brothers who served their country and came home to equipment that doesn't work. Systems that fail them. A government that forgets them the moment they stop being useful. His grip on Mac's hand tightened. You just showed us what one man with skill and heart can do. Now imagine what we could do together. Mac looked around at the assembled bikers, at Destiny still crying and laughing, at the crumbling garage that had been his failing business and might just become something more. What exactly did you have in mind? Reaper's smile widened. Brother, we're just getting started. Reaper didn't waste time with explanations. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his vest pocket and pressed it into Mac's hand. What's this? A list, 157 names, every disabled veteran in Detroit and the surrounding areas who's suffering with equipment that doesn't work. Mac unfolded the paper. The names went on and on, handwritten in neat columns. Some had notes beside them. Lost both legs, Fallujah. Spinal injury, Kandahar. Traumatic brain injury, Mosul. Where did you get this? We've been collecting it for 3 years. Every VA hospital, every veteran support group, every brother who served and came home broken. The government gives them garbage equipment. Cheapest bidder wins. Nobody cares if it actually works. Mac looked up from the list. And you want me to fix all of them? I want you to try. Reaper, I can barely keep my own shop open. I'm 3 months behind on rent. I eat gas station food because I can't afford groceries. How am I supposed to help 157 people when I can't even help myself? Reaper stepped closer. His voice dropped low enough that only Mac could hear. You're not alone anymore. We supply the materials. We supply the parts. We supply whatever you need to do the work. You supply the skill. You supply the eyes that see what others miss. And you supply the heart that gives a damn about people the system forgot. For free. You want me to work for free. For family. That's what veterans are. Family. And family takes care of each other. Mac stared at the list in his hands. 157 names. 157 people suffering the way Destiny had suffered. 157 chances to make a difference. His grandmother's voice echoed in his head again. God gave you hands that can heal machines. Don't you ever let fear stop you from using that gift. When do we start? Reaper smiled that rare smile again. Right now. Big Earl's been waiting 3 years for someone to fix his chair. A massive biker stepped forward from the crowd. He was older than Reaper, maybe 55, with gray streaking through his beard and thick scars visible on his forearms. He sat in a wheelchair that looked like it had been through a war. Because it had. Marcus Big Earl Thompson, he said, extending a hand that could have crushed Max if he'd wanted it to. Lost both legs in Fallujah 2004. Been in this chair ever since. The VA gave it to me. Said it was state-of-the-art. Mac knelt beside the wheelchair, ignoring his screaming knee. His eyes moved over the frame with the same systematic precision he'd used on Destiny's chair. It took him 8 seconds to find the first problem. Your wheels don't track straight. Big Earl's eyes widened. How the hell did you know that I've been telling the VA for years? They keep saying the alignment is within specifications. Specifications don't mean a damn thing if the chair pulls left every time you try to go straight. Your shoulders are compensating for that drift every single moment you're in this chair. That's why they hurt. Big Earl was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. 8 years. I've been fighting that pull for 8 years. Thought it was just me getting old. Thought my body was giving out. It's not you. It was never you. Can you fix it? Mac stood up. Bring it to my shop tomorrow morning. I'll have it ready by noon. Big Earl grabbed Mac's wrist. His grip was iron, but his eyes were wet. You don't understand what this means. I served 3 tours. I gave my legs for this country. And the only person who's listened to me in 8 years is a mechanic in a falling down garage. I'm a veteran too, Mac said quietly. I know what it feels like to be forgotten. The crowd of bikers had gone silent. Every man watched as Big Earl and Mac looked at each other, with the understanding that only veterans share. Then another voice cut through the silence. What about me? A younger man pushed through the crowd. He walked with a severe limp using a walker that was clearly too short for his frame. His back was bent in a way that spoke of years of compensation and pain. Dwayne Mitchell, IED outside Mosul took out my hip. The VA gave me this walker 4 years ago. Physical therapist says I need a custom fit, but insurance won't cover it, so I live with it. Mac looked at the walker. The height was wrong by at least 3 inches. Every step Dwayne took was destroying his spine. How long have you been in pain? Since I got home, 6 years now. Sometimes I can't sleep because my back won't stop burning. And nobody adjusted the height. They said it was standard issue, one size fits most. Dwayne laughed bitterly. Guess I'm not most. Mac felt the anger building in his chest again. That same hot fury he'd felt looking at Destiny's wheelchair. That same rage at a system that treated veterans like afterthoughts. Bring it tomorrow. I'll fix it. I can't pay you. Disability check barely covers rent. I didn't ask for money. I asked you to bring it tomorrow. Dwayne stared at him. Then his face crumpled and he turned away, hiding the tears that came. Another veteran stepped forward. Then another. Then 5 more. Stories poured out of them like water breaking through a dam. Wheelchairs that didn't roll straight. Prosthetics that caused blisters and sores. Walkers that were too short or too tall, or missing padding that had worn away years ago. Equipment that met every specification and failed every person who used it. Mac listened to all of them. He examined equipment right there in the parking lot, identifying problems in seconds that VA technicians had missed for years. He wrote notes on the back of Reaper's list, cataloging issues, planning repairs, estimating how long each fix would take. By noon, he had 23 appointments scheduled for the next week. By evening, he had 47. Destiny rolled up beside him as the last of the bikers prepared to leave. "You know what you just did?" Mac shook his head. "I have no idea what I just did." "You gave them hope. Most of these men haven't had hope in years. The system beat it out of them. They learned to stop expecting things to get better because expecting hurt too much." She reached out and touched his arm. "You gave that back to them." "I just said I'd try to help." "That's more than anyone else has said in a very long time." Reaper approached his motorcycle, rumbling behind him. "Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. My guys will be here with materials, tools, whatever you need. We're turning this garage into something real. This garage is barely standing. Then we'll make it stand better. That's what we do. We build. We fix. We take care of our own." Reaper put his hand on Mac's shoulder. "Welcome to the family, brother." The bikers roared out of the parking lot in formation, the thunder of their engines fading into the distance. Mac stood alone in front of his garage, holding a list of 157 names, wondering what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. He didn't sleep that night, not because of anxiety or doubt, because he couldn't stop planning. His mind raced through modifications and repairs, calculating materials and time estimates, designing solutions for problems he'd only glimpsed during those quick examinations in the parking lot. At 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before they were scheduled to arrive, the rumbling started again. But this time it wasn't just motorcycles. 2 pickup trucks led the convoy, their beds loaded with equipment. Behind them came a box truck with Detroit Iron painted on the side. And behind that, 15 motorcycles carrying brothers who'd apparently taken the day off work to help transform Mac's failing garage into something real. Reaper was first through the door. "Coffee." He held out a cup from the expensive place across town. The good stuff, not the gas station sludge Mac usually survived on. "You didn't have to do this." "Yeah, I did. Now drink your coffee and show us where you want things." What followed was 8 hours of organized chaos. The bikers worked with military precision. Some installed new lighting, replacing the flickering fluorescence with bright LEDs that actually let Mac see what he was working on. Others assembled a professional pneumatic lift he'd only ever dreamed of owning. Still others organized materials tools, replacement parts. By 3 in the afternoon, Mac's crumbling garage had been transformed. Not into something fancy. It was still humble. Still on the wrong side of town. Still held together by determination more than construction quality. But now it was functional. Now it was equipped. Now it was ready for the work that lay ahead. Destiny had been there all day, organizing, directing, keeping track of who was doing what. She'd transferred herself from her wheelchair to a work stool so she could sort through the medical equipment they'd collected. "You know," she said to Mac during a brief break, "I've never seen my father like this." "Like what?" "Happy, actually happy. For 2 years, all he's done is worry about me and get angry at people who couldn't help me. Now he has something to do, something that matters. You didn't just fix my chair, Mac. You fixed something in him, too." Mac didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and got back to work. Big Earl arrived at 4:30 p.m., right on schedule. His wheelchair was even worse than Mac had realized during the quick examination in the parking lot. The frame had stress fractures that nobody had noticed. The bearings were grinding. The seat cushion had compressed to almost nothing, creating pressure points that were probably causing skin breakdown. "How long since anyone serviced this chair?" Big Earl shrugged. "The VA sends a technician once a year. He comes, checks a few boxes, says everything looks fine, and leaves. Takes about 15 minutes. 15 minutes. If that. They've got quotas. Too many veterans, not enough techs. Nobody has time to actually look at anything." Mac felt his jaw tighten. 15 minutes. A man who'd given both legs for his country got 15 minutes of attention once a year. "This is going to take longer than I thought," Mac said. "The whole chair needs to be rebuilt. Not just aligned. Rebuilt." "How long?" 2 days, maybe 3. I need to fabricate new frame supports. The originals are failing." Big Earl's face fell. "I can't go 3 days without a chair." "We've got a loaner," Destiny called from across the garage. "Dad bought 3 backup chairs last month. We figured people would need them while Mac worked on their equipment." Mac looked at Reaper, who had somehow appeared without making a sound. "You planned for this. I planned for everything. That's how I've stayed alive this long." They transferred Big Earl to one of the loaner chairs, and Mac got to work on the rebuild. The brothers who'd stayed behind watched him work, asking questions, taking notes. They wanted to learn. They wanted to be able to help with simple repairs so Mac could focus on the complex cases. At 7:15 p.m., Mac's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but he answered anyway. "Washington Auto and Cycle." "Is this Marcus Washington?" "The mechanic who fixed Victor Stone's daughter's wheelchair." The voice was cold, professional, and somehow threatening without raising its volume. "Who's asking? My name is Dr. Harrison Wells. I'm the lead engineer at Precision Mobility Solutions. We designed and built the wheelchair you apparently fixed yesterday." Mac felt the temperature in the garage drop. Every biker who'd been working nearby stopped what they were doing and turned toward him. "What do you want?" "I want to know who the hell you think you are questioning our engineering. That chair passed every FDA certification. It met every clinical specification. It was approved by 3 independent review boards, and you're telling people we got it wrong." "I'm telling people the truth." "The truth?" Dr. Wells laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is that you're an unlicensed mechanic operating out of a garage in one of the worst neighborhoods in Detroit. You have no engineering credentials, no medical certification, no authority whatsoever to modify FDA-approved medical equipment. I have 2 eyes and 30 years of experience. That chair was torturing his daughter. That chair was perfect. Perfect for who? Because it sure as hell wasn't perfect for the 17-year-old girl who's been in pain for 2 years. The line went silent for a long moment. When Dr. Wells spoke again, his voice was ice. "I'm putting you on notice, Mr. Washington. If anything happens to that girl as a result of your modifications, we will hold you personally liable. Our lawyers are already preparing documentation. You've opened yourself up to massive legal exposure, and we will not hesitate to pursue every avenue available to us." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. You have no idea what you've stepped into. This isn't some backyard mechanic project. This is a multi-million-dollar industry with powerful interests who don't appreciate outsiders making them look bad." Mac looked around the garage, at the bikers who'd stopped working to listen, at Big Earl in his loaner chair, at Destiny who'd wheeled herself closer, her face tight with anger. "Dr. Wells, let me tell you something. I spent 8 years in the United States Army keeping soldiers alive by making sure their equipment worked. I've seen what happens when people prioritize specifications over reality. I've buried friends because someone decided that good enough was acceptable." His voice hardened. "Your chair met every specification. I'm sure it looked beautiful in your presentations. I'm sure it impressed every review board. But it was wrong for the person using it. And all your certifications and lawyers and threats don't change that simple fact." You're making a very dangerous mistake. No, I'm fixing one. Have a good evening, Dr. Wells. He hung up. The garage was silent. Then Reaper started laughing. A deep, genuine laugh that seemed completely out of character for a man with his reputation. Brother, you just told a multi-million-dollar corporation to go to hell. Was that stupid? Probably. Reaper clapped him on the shoulder. But it was also the right thing to do. And around here we respect people who do the right thing, even when it's stupid. Big Earl rolled his loner chair closer. They're going to come after you. Companies like that don't like being embarrassed. They've got resources, lawyers, connections. They can make your life very difficult. They can try. I'm serious, Mac. You need protection. Reaper's laughter faded into something more serious. He's got protection. He's got 95 brothers who don't take kindly to people threatening family. I'm not asking for a war. You're not asking for anything. But that's what family does. We show up when it matters. Reaper looked around at the assembled bikers. Anyone here have a problem standing up for a man who helps veterans? Silence! Then, one by one, every biker in the garage nodded. That's what I thought. Reaper turned back to Mac. You focus on fixing people. Let us worry about anyone who tries to stop you. Mac wanted to argue. Wanted to say he could handle his own problems. But looking at these men, these veterans, these brothers who'd accepted him into their family without hesitation, he realized something. He'd been alone for a long time. Since the army. Since his divorce. Since his business started failing, and his friends stopped calling, and his life narrowed down to a garage nobody cared about, and repairs that barely paid the bills. He wasn't alone anymore. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. Destiny wheeled up beside him. Her eyes were fierce, blazing with the same fire he'd seen in her father. They blamed me for 2 years. They told me I was the problem. They made me think I was crazy for feeling pain they said didn't exist. Her voice shook with anger. And now they're threatening you for proving them wrong. It's just business to them, protecting their reputation. It's not business to me. It's my life. And you gave it back to me. She grabbed his hand. Whatever happens, whatever they try to do, I'm with you. We're all with you. The moment stretched out. Mac looked at this 17-year-old girl who'd suffered in silence for 2 years and emerged stronger than anyone had a right to expect. He looked at her father, the dangerous biker who'd become something like a friend. He looked at Big Earl and the other veterans who'd trusted him with their pain. Then he squared his shoulders and got back to work. Because there were 156 more names on that list. 156 more people who needed someone to see them. 156 more chances to prove that expertise wasn't about degrees or money. It was about caring enough to look closely. And Mac Washington had spent his whole life learning how to look closely. The phone call from Dr. Wells had changed nothing about his mission. If anything, it had strengthened his resolve. These corporate engineers had spent 2 years blaming a teenage girl for their failures. They'd taken $45,000 and delivered a torture device disguised as a wheelchair. Now they were threatening him for exposing the truth. Let them try. Mac bent over Big Earl's disassembled wheelchair and picked up his welder. He had work to do. 3 weeks after Dr. Wells's threatening phone call, Mac had helped 41 veterans. 41 wheelchairs rebuilt. 41 walkers adjusted. 41 lives changed by a man who simply cared enough to listen. The wall of his garage now held 41 photographs. Faces smiling in ways their families probably hadn't seen in years. Names written below each photo in Destiny's careful handwriting. A testament to what happened when someone refused to accept that good enough was acceptable. Big Earl's wheelchair had taken 4 days instead of 3. The frame damage was worse than Mac had initially assessed, requiring him to fabricate entirely new support struts from scratch. But when Big Earl rolled out of the garage on that fourth day, tears streaming down his weathered face, he'd grabbed Mac's hand and held it for a full minute without speaking. 8 years, he'd finally said. 8 years of fighting that chair every single day, and you fixed it in 4. Should have been fixed 8 years ago. Yeah, it should have. But it wasn't, because nobody cared enough to look. Big Earl had pulled something from around his neck, his dog tags, the ones he'd worn through 3 deployments to Iraq. You earned these more than I ever did. Mac had tried to refuse. Those tags represented sacrifice he couldn't begin to match, but Big Earl had pressed them into his hand with the force of absolute conviction. Take them. Please. Let me give you something that means what you gave me. The tags hung on Mac's workbench now, right next to Destiny's note, and the photograph of his army unit. Someone please help. It hurts. 41 people had asked for help. 41 people had stopped hurting. But on the morning of day 22, everything changed. Mac was adjusting the wheel alignment on a Vietnam veteran's ancient wheelchair when Destiny burst through the garage door. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. She held her phone like it might explode. Mac, you need to see this. Right now. She thrust the phone toward him. On the screen was a news article from the Detroit Free Press. Local mechanic faces federal investigation for illegal medical device modifications. His stomach dropped. What the hell? He grabbed the phone and read quickly. The article claimed that an unnamed mechanic in Detroit was modifying FDA-approved medical equipment without proper licensing, that federal regulators were investigating potential violations, that legal experts warned such modifications could endanger patients and expose the perpetrator to criminal charges. The article didn't name him directly, but it described his location, his background, his work with disabled veterans. Anyone who knew anything about what was happening in this garage would know exactly who they were talking about. They're coming after you, Destiny said. Dr. Wells and his company. They made good on their threat. Mac's phone started ringing. Then it rang again. And again. 3 news outlets wanted interviews. 2 lawyers offered their services. One person just called it to curse him out for endangering disabled people. By noon, there were news vans parked outside his garage. Reaper arrived at 12:47 p.m. with 15 brothers. They formed a wall between the reporters and Mac's garage door, their leather vests and hard faces creating a barrier that even the most aggressive journalists weren't willing to cross. Don't talk to them, Reaper said. Don't say anything. Anything you say will be twisted and used against you. I haven't done anything wrong. Doesn't matter. They're not interested in truth. They're interested in a story. Black mechanic illegally modifying medical equipment makes a better headline than corporation blames teenager for their design failures. Mac felt the walls closing in. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a broke mechanic, barely surviving. Now, he was at the center of a media firestorm that threatened to destroy everything he'd built. What do I do? Right now, you keep working. You help the people who need you, and you let me handle the rest. How are you going to handle federal investigators? Reaper's smile was cold. Brother, I've handled worse than federal investigators. Trust me. But trust was getting harder. At 3:15 p.m., a black sedan pulled up to the garage. 2 men in suits stepped out, their movements precise, their expressions professionally neutral. Marcus Washington, Mac's heart hammered. Who's asking? Special Agent Rodriguez, FDA Office of Criminal Investigations. The man held up credentials that looked terrifyingly official. We need to ask you some questions about your activities here. Reaper stepped forward. He's not answering any questions without a lawyer present. Agent Rodriguez's eyes moved to Reaper's vest, reading the patches. His expression didn't change. And you are a concerned citizen. I see. Rodriguez turned back to Mac. Mr. Washington, you're not under arrest. We're simply conducting an inquiry based on complaints we've received. You can cooperate voluntarily, or we can pursue this through more formal channels. What complaints? Allegations that you're modifying FDA-approved medical devices without proper certification, that you're performing work that requires licensed medical equipment technicians, that you may be endangering patients with unauthorized modifications. I'm helping veterans who've been abandoned by the system. That may be your perspective. Our perspective is that medical device regulations exist for good reasons. People can be hurt by improperly modified equipment. Mac felt anger rise in his chest. You want to talk about people being hurt? I've got 41 veterans who spent years in pain because your approved equipment didn't work for them. I've got a 17-year-old girl who suffered for 2 years while your certified engineers blamed her for their failures. You want to investigate someone? Investigate the companies that charge $45,000 for wheelchairs that torture the people using them. Agent Rodriguez's expression remained neutral. Mr. Washington, I understand you're frustrated, but the law is the law. If you've been modifying medical equipment without proper authorization, there are potential consequences. And if I stop, if I close my doors and tell 116 more veterans that I can't help them because the government is protecting corporations instead of people, that's your choice to make. Mac stared at the agent. Behind him, he could feel Reaper and the other bikers tensing, ready for whatever came next. I'd like to speak with a lawyer before I answer any more questions. Rodriguez nodded. That's your right. We'll be in touch. He handed Mac a business card. When you're ready to talk, call this number. The agents returned to their sedan and drove away. The news vans followed them, hoping for a better angle on the story. Mac stood in his garage doorway, holding a business card that felt like a death sentence. I'm going to lose everything, he said quietly. The garage, the work, everything I've built in the last 3 weeks. Reaper put a hand on his shoulder. Not if I can help it. How they're the federal government. You can't intimidate the FDA. No, but I know people who can fight them with their own weapons. Reaper pulled out his phone. There's a lawyer, former military, handles cases exactly like this. Veterans' rights medical device disputes corporate accountability. She's the best in the state. I can't afford the best lawyer in the state. You're not paying for her, we are. Reaper, I can't accept. You don't have a choice. Reaper's voice hardened. You're family now. And Family FI doesn't let family fight alone, especially not against people who are attacking them for doing the right thing. He made the call. The lawyer's name was Patricia Pat Morrison. She arrived at the garage at 6:23 p.m., driving a car that was expensive enough to look out of place, but modest enough to suggest she didn't care about appearances. She was in her mid-50s with gray streaking through black hair she kept pulled back severely. Her eyes were sharp, evaluating everything, missing nothing. She walked with the confident stride of someone who'd spent her life winning fights others thought were impossible. Reaper tells me you've got a federal problem. I've got a corporation using federal regulations to shut me down because I embarrassed them. Same thing usually. She looked around the garage at the photographs on the wall, at the equipment, at the veterans' names written in careful handwriting. Tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. Mac talked for an hour. He told her about Destiny's wheelchair, about the hidden note, about the 41 veterans he'd helped, about Dr. Wells's threatening phone call, and the news article, and the FDA agents who'd shown up that afternoon. Pat listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You know what's interesting about this case, Mr. Washington? What? You haven't actually broken any laws. Mac blinked. The agent said, you might be in violation. Might be. That's very different from are in violation. Pat leaned forward. FDA regulations govern medical device manufacturers and certified repair facilities. You're neither. You're a mechanic who's making modifications at the personal request of device owners. There's legal precedent for that kind of work. So I'm not in trouble. I didn't say that. Precision Mobility Solutions is clearly trying to use regulatory pressure to shut you down. They've got lawyers and lobbyists and relationships with federal agencies. They can make your life very difficult even if you haven't technically broken any laws. Then what do I do? Pat smiled. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed a good fight. You fight back, not with intimidation or threats, with truth, with documentation, with evidence that their equipment failed and yours succeeded. She stood up. I need to see everything. Every wheelchair you've modified, every adjustment you've made, every veteran you've helped. I need photographs, testimonials, before and after documentation. I've been keeping records. Destiny organized everything. Good. Then we've got a foundation to build on. Pat looked at him directly. Mr. Washington, I've spent 30 years fighting corporations that put profits over people. I've never lost a case I believed in. And I believe in this one. Why? Because my father was a veteran. Came home from Vietnam with a back injury that the VA never properly treated. He spent the last 20 years of his life in pain because nobody cared enough to actually help him. Her voice hardened. I care, and I'm very, very good at making people pay for not caring. The next 72 hours were a blur of activity. Pat Morrison worked like a woman possessed. She gathered documentation from every veteran Mac had helped, photographs of equipment before and after modification, written testimonials describing years of pain suddenly alleviated, medical records showing chronic issues that had cleared up after Mac's work. She filed Freedom of Information requests for Precision Mobility Solutions FDA approval documents. She contacted engineering experts who could testify about the design flaws Mac had identified. She reached out to disability rights organizations who were more than willing to support a case against a corporation that blamed patients for equipment failures. On day 25, at 9:47 a.m., she walked into Mac's garage with a folder thick enough to use as a weapon. We're going on offense. What does that mean? It means I've found 17 other complaints against Precision Mobility Solutions. 17 other cases where patients reported the exact same problems Destiny experienced. Pain, discomfort, equipment that technically met specifications but didn't actually work. Mac felt his anger surge. 17 other people, and they didn't do anything. The complaints were filed and dismissed. The company's lawyers are very good at making problems go away. But they made a mistake this time. What mistake? They went public. They tipped off the media. They tried to destroy you instead of quietly settling. Pat's smile was predatory. Now I can tie their attacks on you to a pattern of behavior. I can show that they systematically dismissed patient complaints. I can demonstrate that their response to criticism is intimidation rather than improvement. Will that be enough? It's going to be more than enough. I'm filing a counter-complaint with the FDA. I'm requesting an investigation into Precision Mobility Solutions quality control procedures, and I'm reaching out to every news outlet that covered the original story to offer them a much more interesting follow-up. Destiny had been listening from across the garage. Now she wheeled closer. You're going to expose them. I'm going to do more than expose them. I'm going to hold them accountable. Pat looked at the young woman who'd suffered for 2 years in silence. You're going to testify, if you're willing. Your story is the heart of this case. Destiny didn't hesitate. I'll testify. I'll tell everyone what it was like. The pain, the self-blame, the way they looked at me like I was the problem. Her voice strengthened. I want people to know what they did. Reaper stepped forward. Are you sure, baby girl, once you go public, you can't take it back? Dad, I've been quiet for 2 years. I've let them define what happened to me. I've let them make me feel like I was broken. She lifted her chin. I'm done being quiet. I'm done letting them win. Mac watched this 17-year-old girl transform into something fierce and unbreakable. The same girl who'd hidden a desperate note in her wheelchair cushion was now volunteering to face down the corporation that had made her suffer. You're brave, he said quietly. No, I'm angry. Destiny's eyes blazed. There's a difference. Brave is doing something scary because it's right. Angry is doing something scary because you refuse to let the bastards get away with it. Pat Morrison laughed. I like her. She's going to make an excellent witness. The media tide turned on day 28. Pat had arranged for interviews with 3 major news outlets. Destiny told her story with unflinching honesty. She described the pain, the dismissal, the moment when Mac had asked her what was wrong instead of telling her she was wrong. Big Earl appeared on camera too, and Dwayne. And a dozen other veterans who'd been told their equipment was perfect while they suffered in silence. The articles that followed were devastating for Precision Mobility Solutions. Veterans accuse medical device company of systemic negligence. Teenage wheelchair user. They told me I was the problem. Detroit mechanic exposes design flaws in $45,000. Wheelchair. The company's stock dropped 11% in 2 days. Dr. Wells stopped returning media calls. The FDA investigation quietly shifted focus from Mac's garage to Precision Mobility Solutions quality control procedures. On the morning of day 30 at 8:15 a.m., Mac received an unexpected visitor. The man who walked into his garage was not what Mac expected. He was young, maybe 30, wearing casual clothes instead of a suit. His eyes were tired. His shoulders were slumped. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Mr. Washington. Who's asking? My name is Kevin Chen. I'm a design engineer at Precision Mobility Solutions. He took a deep breath. I'm the one who designed Destiny Stone's wheelchair. Mac felt his entire body tense. Behind him, he heard movement as several bikers who'd been working nearby stepped closer. You've got some nerve coming here. I know, but I needed to talk to you. Kevin's voice cracked. I needed to apologize. Apologize! I saw the specifications you documented, the weight distribution issues, the alignment problems, the seat geometry that didn't match real-world use. Kevin's hands were shaking. I raised those concerns during development. I told them the design prioritized stability metrics over user comfort. I told them we needed more real-world testing. I told them the clinical trials weren't capturing actual daily use patterns. And what did they say? They said the design met specifications. They said my concerns were unfounded. They said if I couldn't support the team's direction, maybe I wasn't the right fit for the company. Kevin's voice broke completely. So I shut up. I did what I was told. I watched them sell that chair to hundreds of families. And I knew it wasn't right. Mac stared at this young engineer. At the guilt written across his face. At the weight he'd clearly been carrying for years. Why are you telling me this? Because I can't stay silent anymore. Because I saw Destiny Stone's interview, and I recognized everything she described. Because I've spent the last 3 weeks looking at myself in the mirror and hating what I see. Kevin reached into his bag and pulled out a thick folder. I have documentation, internal emails, design review notes, evidence that leadership knew about potential issues and chose to ignore them. Mac didn't touch the folder. You know what this will do to your career, to your life. I know. But there are children using our chairs, Mr. Washington. Children. And they might be suffering the same way Destiny suffered. They might be blaming themselves the same way she blamed herself. Kevin's eyes filled with tears. I can't live with that. I won't live with that. The garage had gone completely silent. Mac looked at this young man who had everything to lose and was choosing to lose it anyway, who was standing in a garage full of bikers and veterans offering evidence that could destroy the company that employed him. You understand that if you do this, there's no going back. I understand. And you're sure? Kevin wiped his eyes. I became an engineer because I wanted to help people. I wanted to design things that made lives better, and instead I've been part of a system that prioritizes profits over patients. He held out the folder again. This is who I want to be. Someone who tells the truth, even when it's hard. Mac finally took the folder. You're brave, he said. No. Kevin almost smiled through his tears. I'm just done being a coward. Pat Morrison arrived within the hour. When she finished reviewing Kevin Chen's documentation, her expression was triumphant. This changes everything. Internal communications showing they knew about design concerns, meeting notes documenting decisions to proceed despite engineering objections, email chains discussing how to manage potential liability. What does it mean? It means we're not just defending you anymore. It means we're going after them. So Pat looked at Kevin, who sat in the corner of the garage, looking terrified and relieved in equal measure. And with his testimony, we're going to win. Destiny wheeled over to Kevin. He flinched, expecting anger, expecting accusation. Instead, she extended her hand. Thank you. Kevin stared at her. I'm the one who designed the chair that hurt you. You're also the one who's helping expose the people who ignored your warnings. That takes courage. She squeezed his hand. I don't blame you. I blame the people who told you to be quiet, and I'm glad you finally decided to stop listening to them. Kevin Chen broke down completely, then sobbing in a way that released years of guilt and self-hatred. Destiny held his hand through all of it, this 17-year-old girl, comforting the engineer who had designed her prison. Mac watched and felt something shift in his chest. This was bigger than wheelchairs now. Bigger than one garage or one corporation or one federal investigation. This was about truth, about accountability, about people choosing to do what was right even when it cost them everything. And somehow, a broke black mechanic from Detroit had become the center of it all. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Washington, this is Dr. Harrison Wells. I believe we should talk. Privately. There may be a way to resolve this situation that benefits everyone. Mac stared at the message. Then he showed it to Reaper. What do you think? Reaper read the text, his expression darkening. I think a rat knows when the ship is sinking. The question is whether you want to hear what he has to say. Mac looked around his garage, at the photographs on the wall, at the veterans who'd trusted him, at Destiny and Kevin, and everyone who'd risked something to be part of this fight. Yeah, he said slowly. I want to hear what he has to say. He typed a response. Tomorrow, my garage, noon, come alone. The reply came instantly. I'll be there. Dr. Harrison Wells arrived at exactly 11:58 a.m. Mac watched him park a silver Mercedes in the lot, step out, and walk toward the garage with the careful movements of a man entering enemy territory. He wore an expensive suit that looked completely out of place in this neighborhood, and his face carried the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Reaper stood just inside the garage door, arms crossed. Big Earl sat in his rebuilt wheelchair near the workbench. Destiny had positioned herself beside Mac, refusing to leave despite her father's protests. Pat Morrison waited in the back, a legal pad ready, her predator's eyes tracking every movement Wells made. "That's far enough," Reaper said when Wells reached the entrance. Wells stopped. His eyes moved across the assembled group, cataloging threats, calculating odds. Whatever bravado he'd shown on the phone weeks ago had evaporated. This was a man who understood he was losing. "Mr. Washington, thank you for agreeing to meet." "I didn't agree to anything. I said you could talk, so talk." Wells glanced at Destiny. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or fear of what she represented. "Could we speak privately?" "No. The matters I want to discuss are sensitive. Business considerations that... The 17-year-old girl you blamed for your design failures is standing right here. The veterans you would have let suffer in silence are in this room. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of them." Wells's jaw tightened. For a moment, Mac thought he might turn and leave. But desperation won over pride. "Fine. Then let me be direct." He took a breath. "We're prepared to offer you a settlement, a substantial one, in exchange for dropping your countercomplaint and signing a non-disclosure agreement." "How substantial?" $2 million. The number hung in the air. Big Earl whistled low. Even Reaper's expression shifted slightly. $2 million. More money than Mac would make in 50 years at his current rate. Enough to transform his garage into a proper facility. Enough to help hundreds of veterans. Enough to change everything. "And what do you get?" "You stop talking to the media. You stop supporting the FDA investigation. You sign documentation stating that our equipment met all applicable standards and that your modifications were unauthorized alterations that we cannot endorse or support." "You want me to say I was wrong?" "I want you to say the situation was more complicated than media coverage suggested." Mac looked at Destiny, at Big Earl, at the photographs on his wall representing 41 veterans he'd helped. What about them? What about the people who suffered because your equipment was wrong? Our equipment was not wrong. It met every specification. It passed every certification. Whatever issues individual users experienced. Individual users. Destiny's voice cut through like a blade. "I have a name, Dr. Wells. My name is Destiny Stone. I spent 2 years in constant pain while your company told my father I wasn't trying hard enough. I hid a note in my wheelchair begging someone to help me because I thought I was going crazy. And you're standing here calling me an individual user with issues." Wells's face paled. "Miss Stone, I understand you had a difficult experience." "Difficult experience? Is that what we're calling it now?" Destiny wheeled closer, and Wells actually stepped back. "Do you have any idea what it's like to hurt every single day and be told the pain isn't real and to blame yourself because experts say there's nothing wrong to feel like your body is betraying you when actually it was your equipment all along? The chair met specifications. The chair was torture." Destiny was shaking now, but not with weakness, with fury. "And you knew. Kevin Chen told us. He showed us the emails. You knew there were design concerns and you ignored them because fixing them would cost money and delay your timeline." Wells's expression shifted. The corporate mask cracked, revealing genuine alarm. "Mr. Chen violated his confidentiality agreement. Anything he shared with you is legally protected information that proves you prioritized profits over patients." Pat Morrison stepped forward, her voice cool and precise. "I've reviewed every document Mr. Chen provided. Internal communications documenting engineering concerns that were dismissed. Meeting notes showing leadership decisions to proceed despite warnings. Email chains discussing liability management strategies. Those communications are proprietary. Those communications are evidence of negligence, and when the FDA completes their investigation, when the civil suits start rolling in, when the families of everyone who suffered with your equipment learn what you knew, and when you knew it, proprietary won't protect you." Wells looked like a man watching his world collapse in slow motion. This is extortion. No, Dr. Wells. Extortion would be threatening to release this information unless you pay us. We're not threatening anything. We're simply proceeding with a legitimate legal response to corporate misconduct. Pat smiled. The $2 million offer is appreciated. But my client isn't interested in being silenced. He's interested in accountability. Everyone has a price. Not everyone. Mac spoke quietly, but his voice carried across the garage. 3 weeks ago, I was a broke mechanic who could barely afford groceries. You could have offered me $2 million, and I might have taken it. But that was before I met 41 veterans who'd been abandoned by your system. Before I held a note from a 17-year-old girl begging for help. Before I understood what was really at stake. He stepped closer to Wells. This isn't about money anymore. It's about making sure nobody else goes through what Destiny went through. It's about holding you accountable for decisions you made knowing they would hurt people. It's about proving that expertise isn't about degrees or certifications. It's about actually caring whether the people using your equipment are okay. Wells stared at him. You're making a mistake. We have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers, lobbyists, connections in every regulatory agency. We can make your life very difficult. You've already tried that. It didn't work. Because we were playing nice. If you force us into a real fight, then fight. Reaper's voice was ice. You think you're the first corporation to threaten us? You think your lawyers and lobbyists scare men who've survived actual wars? We've been fighting systems that wanted us dead since before your company existed. He stepped between Wells and Mac. Here's what's going to happen, Dr. Wells. You're going to walk out of this garage. You're going to go back to your board of directors and tell them that the broke mechanic didn't take your money. Then you're going to prepare for the legal consequences of decisions you made years ago. And if you or anyone from your company threatens Mac Washington or his family again, you'll discover that Hell's Angels don't make threats. We make promises. Wells's face had gone completely white. This is over, Pat Morrison said. Meeting concluded. Please leave the premises. For a long moment, Wells didn't move. His eyes swept across the room one more time, searching for weakness, for leverage, for any angle he could exploit. He found none. You're all going to regret this, he said quietly. Maybe. Mac met his eyes without flinching. But at least we'll be able to look at ourselves in the mirror. Wells turned and walked out of the garage. His Mercedes started with an expensive purr and pulled away. Within moments, he was gone. The silence that followed felt like exhaling after holding your breath too long. $2 million. Big Earl shook his head. You just turned down $2 million. It wasn't mine to take. That money was meant to buy silence about things that need to be said. Destiny rolled up beside him and took his hand. My hero, she said simply. Mac laughed, but it came out rough. I'm nobody's hero. I'm just a mechanic who got tired of watching people suffer. That's exactly what a hero would say. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors. At 2:34 p.m., 3 news vans returned. But this time they weren't there to attack Mac. They wanted his response to breaking news Precision Mobility Solutions stock had crashed another 18% after rumors leaked that a whistleblower had provided damaging internal documents. At 3:47 p.m., a representative from a veterans advocacy group arrived with papers. They wanted Mac to join their advisory board. They wanted him to help develop standards for how medical equipment should actually be tested with real users giving real feedback. At 5:12 p.m., the most unexpected visitor of all pulled into the parking lot. Mac recognized the car immediately, a blue Honda Civic with a dented front bumper, the same car that had driven away 4 years ago when his marriage ended. Sarah Washington stepped out of the vehicle looking almost exactly the way he remembered. A little more gray in her hair, a few more lines around her eyes, but the same sharp intelligence. the same cautious warmth. The same woman he'd loved and lost because he couldn't stop working long enough to fight for their relationship. Sarah. Hello, Mac. Her voice was soft, uncertain. I saw the news coverage. I saw what you've been doing. I wanted to... She trailed off, searching for words. I wanted to say I'm proud of you. Mac stood frozen. 4 years of silence. 4 years of wondering what he could have done differently. And now she was here, in his transformed garage, surrounded by veterans and bikers, and the evidence of a life he'd rebuilt from nothing. You drove 3 hours to say that. I drove 3 hours because I finally understood something I didn't understand when we were married. Sarah stepped closer. You always cared more about machines than people. That's what I used to say. Remember? I remember. I was wrong. Her eyes moved across the photographs on the wall. You don't care about machines at all. You care about the people who need machines to work. You care so much that you can't look away when something is broken. You can't accept good enough when you know things could be better. That didn't make me easy to live with. No, it didn't. But it makes you someone who can change the world. She reached out and touched his arm. I'm not here to try to fix what we broke. I'm here because I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what you've always been trying to do. Mac felt something loosen in his chest. Not forgiveness exactly, not reconciliation, but something like understanding, like finally being seen by someone who had once loved him and lost him, and still cared enough to witness what he'd become. Thank you, he said quietly. Take care of yourself, Mac, and keep doing what you're doing. She smiled. The world needs more people who can't look away. She returned to her car and drove away. Mac watched until her tail lights disappeared around the corner. Destiny appeared beside him. Was that your ex-wife? Yeah. She seemed nice. She is nice. We just wanted different things. Do you still love her? Mac considered the question honestly. I love who she was when we were together. But I've changed. She's changed. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes people are meant to be in your life for a season, not forever. Destiny was quiet for a moment. I think you're wise, Mac Washington. I think I've just made a lot of mistakes and tried to learn from them. That's what wisdom is. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media coverage. Pat Morrison filed the formal complaint against Precision Mobility Solutions on day 33. The document was devastating, incorporating Kevin Chen's documentation testimony from multiple affected users and expert analysis of the design flaws Mac had identified. The FDA announced an expanded investigation on day 34. Sources confirmed that the agency was now examining not just Mac's modifications, but the company's entire quality assurance process. On day 35, at 9:23 a.m., Mac received a phone call that changed everything again. Mr. Washington, this is Dr. Angela Martinez from the VA Medical Center in Detroit. I'm the Chief of Rehabilitation Services. Mac's heart rate spiked. Is something wrong? No, Mr. Washington, something is very right. Her voice carried warmth and professional excitement. I've been following your work. I've spoken with veterans you've helped. I've reviewed the documentation your lawyer shared with us. And I want to offer you a position, consultant on equipment assessment and modification for our rehabilitation department. You would work with our patients to evaluate their equipment and recommend improvements based on real-world use patterns. Mac couldn't breathe for a moment. You want to hire me at the VA? I want to create a program based on your methodology, one that prioritizes patient experience over technical specifications, one that actually listens to the people using the equipment instead of assuming the equipment is always correct. Dr. Martinez paused. I believe you could help us transform how we serve veterans across the entire region. I don't have any certifications, no medical credentials. We have plenty of credentialed staff who couldn't see what you saw in 30 seconds. What we don't have is someone who understands that machines serve people, not the other way around. Mac looked around his garage, at the photographs on the wall, at the tools that had become instruments of change, at the life he'd built from nothing. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. But Mr. Washington, don't let imposter syndrome tell you that you're not qualified for this work. You're more qualified than anyone I've met in 30 years of rehabilitation medicine. She hung up, and Mac stood holding his phone, trying to process what had just happened. Reaper found him an hour later still standing in the same spot. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. The VA just offered me a job. Reaper's face broke into a genuine smile. Brother, that's incredible. It's terrifying. I'm a mechanic. I fix cars and bikes and wheelchairs in a garage that was falling apart a month ago. I'm not a medical professional. You're exactly what those veterans need. Someone who listens, someone who cares, someone who sees them as people instead of case numbers. Said Reaper put a hand on his shoulder. You're scared because this is bigger than you imagined. But that's exactly why you have to do it. What about the garage? The garage isn't going anywhere. Your brothers will keep it running. Big Earl's already talking about learning to do basic repairs so he can help other veterans while you're doing fancy consultant work. Mac laughed despite himself. Big Earl doing wheelchair repairs. He's got steady hands and he wants to give back. Says you showed him what it looks like when someone actually cares. Destiny wheeled up to join them. Did I hear right? The VA offered you a job? They offered me a chance to help build something real, a program that puts veterans first. Are you going to take it? Mac looked at this 17-year-old girl who had started everything, who had hidden a note in her wheelchair and waited 2 years for someone to find it, who had testified against the corporation that hurt her and stood beside the engineer who designed her prison and chosen courage over fear at every possible moment. What do you think I should do? I think you should remember something. Destiny's eyes were fierce and certain. 6 weeks ago you were broke and alone and running a garage nobody cared about. You had skills nobody valued and a mission nobody understood. And then you saw something wrong and you decided to fix it. She gestured at the garage around them, at the photographs and the equipment and the bikers who had become family. Look what happened when you stopped being afraid and started being useful. Look what happened when you chose people over safety. I almost lost everything. But you didn't, because when you do the right thing, the universe finds ways to support you. Destiny squeezed his hand. Take the job, Mac. Help more people. Build something that lasts beyond this garage. Mac felt tears threatening. He blinked them back. When did you get so wise? When someone finally listened to me. At 4:47 p.m., Mac called Dr. Martinez back. I'll take the position, on one condition. Name it. I keep the garage open. I keep helping veterans on my own time. The official work supplements what I'm already doing. It doesn't replace it. Mr. Washington, I wouldn't have it any other way. They arranged to meet the following week to discuss details. When Mac hung up, his hands were shaking. Reaper was waiting with 2 cups of coffee. Celebration drink? It's coffee. Best I could do on short notice. Reaper raised his cup. To Mac Washington, mechanic, consultant, and the brother who changed everything. They drank together as the sun began to set. The garage was quiet now. Most of the bikers had gone home. Big Earl had left an hour ago, promising to return in the morning for his first repair lesson. Kevin Chen had started volunteering 3 days a week, using his engineering knowledge to help document issues and design solutions. Destiny sat near the window reading a book, her rebuilt wheelchair, allowing her to sit comfortably for the first time in years. She looked up when Mac approached. You're going to change the whole system, you know. That's terrifying. It should be, but you're going to do it anyway. How do you know? Destiny smiled. Because you're the man who couldn't look away. The man who saw a note hidden in a wheelchair cushion and decided that no one should ever have to write something like that again. She reached out and touched his arm. My father says you're family now. He means it. We all mean it. Whatever comes next, whatever challenges you face, you're not alone anymore. Mac looked at the photographs on his wall. 41 faces. 41 lives changed. And tomorrow there would be more. He'd started with nothing but a failing garage and hands that could heal machines. Now he had a family, a mission, and a future he never could have imagined. Someone please help. It hurts. Destiny's note still hung above his workbench. A reminder of why he did this work. A promise that as long as he was breathing, he would never stop trying to hear the voices that nobody else could hear. The next chapter of his life was about to begin. And Mac Washington was finally ready. 6 months had passed since Mac Washington turned down $2 million. The garage had transformed beyond recognition. Not in appearance, it still sat on the forgotten edge of Detroit, still held together by determination more than construction quality. But what happened inside those walls had become something extraordinary. The wall of photographs now held 247 faces. Veterans from Detroit, from Chicago, from Cleveland, from cities across the Midwest, who had heard about a black mechanic who could see what experts couldn't see. They came in wheelchairs that tortured them and left in wheelchairs that freed them. They came with walkers that destroyed their backs and left standing straighter than they had in years. Big Earl had become Mac's primary assistant. The man who'd lost both legs in Fallujah now spent his days helping other veterans the way Mac had helped him. His hands had grown steady with practice. His eyes had learned to spot problems almost as quickly as Mac's. You know what the difference is? Big Earl asked one morning, working on a wheelchair while Mac observed. Between before and after you came into my life, what's that? Before I was surviving, getting through each day, waiting to die, basically. Big Earl's hands never stopped moving, adjusting testing. Now I'm living. I wake up with purpose. I go to sleep knowing I helped someone. That's worth more than any amount of money. Kevin Chen had left Precision Mobility Solutions 3 months ago. He'd taken a job with a nonprofit organization that designed low-cost mobility equipment for underserved communities. His engineering skills, once used to build beautiful machines that didn't work, were now creating simple machines that changed lives. I'm happier than I've ever been, Kevin told Mac during one of his weekly volunteer visits. I make 1/3 of what I used to make. I live in a tiny apartment, and I've never felt more fulfilled. That's because you're finally doing what you were meant to do. You taught me that. You showed me that expertise isn't about credentials. It's about caring, and the VA consulting position had exceeded every expectation. Dr. Martinez had given Mac unprecedented freedom to reshape how the rehabilitation department approached equipment assessment. His first recommendation had been simple but revolutionary: ask patients what hurts before telling them what should work. It seems obvious, Dr. Martinez said during their monthly review meeting, but you'd be amazed how many medical professionals forget that patients are people, not problems to be solved. I know exactly how many forget. I spent years watching them forget. The program Mac had helped build was now being studied by VA hospitals across the country. His methodology, his approach, his fundamental belief that machines should serve people instead of the other way around was spreading through a system that had failed veterans for decades. But on this particular morning, 6 months after everything began, Mac received news that would test everything he'd built. His phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Mr. Washington, this is Patricia Morrison. Pat, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Something's very right. Her voice carried the triumphant edge he'd come to associate with legal victories. The FDA just completed their investigation into precision mobility solutions. Mac's heart rate spiked. And they're being fined $12 million for quality control violations. They're required to recall and retrofit every wheelchair they've sold in the past 5 years. And Dr. Harrison Wells has been permanently barred from working in medical device development. Mac sat down slowly. His hands were shaking. It's over. The legal fight is over. What you started is just beginning. Pat paused. There's something else. Something I think you need to hear in person. What is it? Come to my office at noon. Bring Destiny and Reaper if they're available. This is news that should be shared with family. Pat Morrison's office was in downtown Detroit, in a building that had probably been impressive 50 years ago and now carried the dignified wear of a structure that had seen better days. Mac found something fitting about that. Pat Morrison didn't need a fancy office. Her reputation spoke for itself. Destiny and Reaper arrived at 11:47 a.m. They'd driven together Destiny in her rebuilt wheelchair, Reaper in his leather vest despite the summer heat. Some things didn't change. Pat was waiting for them with a folder thick enough to require both hands to hold. Thank you for coming. Please sit down. They arranged themselves around her conference table. Mac noticed that Pat's usual predatory confidence had been replaced by something softer, something that looked almost like wonder. I've been practicing law for 32 years, Pat began. I've handled hundreds of cases. I've won more than I've lost. But I've never seen anything like what's happened here. She opened the folder and spread documents across the table. These are the results of what you started, Mac. Not just the FDA investigation. Everything that's come from one mechanic deciding to tell the truth. Pat pointed to the first document. Precision Mobility Solutions has agreed to establish a $50 million fund for affected users. Every person who experienced problems with their equipment will receive compensation and free replacement with properly designed devices. Destiny made a small sound. Reaper's hand found her shoulder. Pat pointed to the second document. The FDA is implementing new testing requirements for all mobility equipment. Real-world user testing with extended evaluation periods. Mandatory feedback collection from actual patients. Requirements that equipment be tested by the people who will actually use it, not just by clinical mannequins in laboratory conditions. They're changing the rules, Mac said quietly. They're changing the entire system. Because of you. Because you saw something wrong and refused to stay silent. Pat pointed to the third document. This is the one I wanted you to see in person. Mac looked at the paper. It was an official certificate from the Department of Veterans Affairs, ornate and formal, the kind of document that got framed and hung on walls. The VA is establishing the Washington Protocol, Pat said. A new standard for equipment assessment based on your methodology. It's being implemented at VA hospitals nationwide, starting next month. Mac couldn't speak. His throat had closed up completely. They named it after me. You earned it. Every veteran who benefits from better equipment for the rest of their lives will benefit because a broke mechanic in Detroit decided that expertise was about caring, not credentials. Destiny was crying. Silent tears streaming down her face, her rebuilt wheelchair allowing her to sit comfortably while she processed what she was hearing. It started with a note, she said softly. A note I hid in my wheelchair because I thought nobody would ever find it. Nobody would ever help. Someone found it, Pat said. Someone helped. And now millions of veterans will have better lives because of that note. Reaper stood up abruptly and walked to the window. His back was to the room, his shoulders tight with emotion he rarely showed. "Reaper," Destiny called. "Dad, I'm fine." His voice was rough. I spent 2 years watching my daughter suffer. 2 years blaming myself for not being able to fix it. 2 years trusting experts who told me I was wrong to question them." He turned back to face the room. And then this man showed up. This mechanic who didn't have a degree or a certification or a fancy office, who had nothing but his eyes and his hands and a heart that couldn't look away from suffering. Reaper crossed the room and stood directly in front of Mac. "You gave me my daughter back. You gave 247 veterans their lives back. You changed a system that had failed us for generations." His voice cracked. "And you did it because you couldn't accept good enough when you knew things could be better." He extended his hand. "Thank you, brother. Thank you for everything." Mac took his hand. The grip was iron, but Reaper's eyes were wet. "I didn't do it alone. You gave me a family. You gave me resources. You gave me protection when the corporation tried to destroy me. That's what family does. I know that now. I didn't know it before." The celebration at the garage that evening was the largest gathering Mac had ever witnessed. Every veteran he'd helped who could make the trip had come. Bikers from Hell's Angels chapters across 3 states. Staff from the VA who had worked with him on the new protocols. Kevin Chen and his colleagues from the nonprofit. Dr. Martinez and her rehabilitation team. Even Pat Morrison, who rarely attended anything that wasn't in a courtroom. The parking lot overflowed with wheelchairs and motorcycles and people who had found each other through shared suffering and unexpected salvation. Big Earl gave a speech that made everyone cry. 8 years, he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. 8 years I spent fighting equipment that was supposed to help me. 8 years I thought my body was failing. 8 years I blamed myself for pain that wasn't my fault. He pointed to Mac. This man took one look at my wheelchair and saw what nobody else could see. Not because he had special training, not because he had expensive equipment, because he cared enough to actually look. He cared enough to listen when I said something was wrong. Big Earl held up the dog tags he'd given Mac months ago. I gave him these because he earned them, because what he does every day requires more courage than anything I ever did in combat. He fights a system that wants veterans to stay silent. He fights corporations that profit from our suffering. He fights the lie that good enough is acceptable when people are in pain. The crowd erupted in applause. Mac stood near the back, uncomfortable with the attention wanting to disappear into the shadows. But Destiny found him and grabbed his hand. "You don't get to hide," she said. "Not tonight. These people came to thank you. The least you can do is let them. I just did what needed to be done. That's what makes you special. Most people see what needs to be done and find reasons not to do it. You see what needs to be done and you do it, no matter the cost, no matter the risk." She pulled him toward the center of the crowd. "Everyone quiet down. Mac has something to say." "I don't have anything to say." "Then make something up. These people need to hear from you." Mac looked out at the assembled crowd, at faces he recognized and faces he didn't. At veterans and bikers and medical professionals and family members who had all been touched in some way by what had started in this humble garage. 6 months ago, he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I was 3 months behind on rent. I was eating gas station food because I couldn't afford groceries. I was running a garage that nobody cared about in a neighborhood that had been forgotten." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Then a man showed up on the highway with a broken motorcycle, and that man had a daughter who was suffering. And that daughter had been told for 2 years that she was the problem, that her body was the failure, that the equipment designed to help her was perfect, and she just needed to try harder. Mac's eyes found Destiny in the crowd. She wasn't the problem. She was never the problem. The problem was a system that valued specifications over people, that trusted certifications over experience, that believed expensive meant correct. His voice strengthened. I didn't change that system alone. Every person in this crowd changed it. Destiny changed it by testifying even when it terrified her. Reaper changed it by building a family around a stranger. Big Earl changed it by refusing to stay silent about his pain. Kevin changed it by walking away from a career to do what was right. Mac looked around at the faces watching him. We changed it together, and we're going to keep changing it, because there are still veterans out there suffering in silence. Still people blaming themselves for equipment failures. Still families being told that their loved ones just need to try harder. He raised his voice. We're going to find them. We're going to help them. We're going to keep fighting until every single person who needs help gets help. Not because we have degrees or certifications or fancy offices, because we have something better. What's that? Someone called from the crowd. Each other. We have each other. And that's more powerful than any corporation or government agency or system that tries to tell us we don't matter. The applause that followed was deafening. Later that night, after most of the crowd had dispersed, Mac found himself alone in his garage with Destiny. She was looking at the wall of photographs. 247 faces, 247 lives changed, and tomorrow there would be more. What are you thinking about? Mac asked. My note. Destiny's voice was soft. The one I hid in my wheelchair. Someone please help, it hurts. I still have it, right there on the wall. I know. I see it every time I come here. She turned to face him. Do you know why I hid that note? Because you needed help and didn't know how to ask for it. No. I mean, yes, that's part of it, but there's something else. Destiny's eyes were serious. I hid that note because I knew deep down that someday someone would find it, someone who would actually see it, someone who would actually care. You couldn't have known I would find it. I didn't know it would be you specifically, but I knew there were people out there who didn't look away from suffering, who couldn't accept that good enough was acceptable, who would fight for someone they'd never met because fighting was the right thing to do. She reached out and took his hand. You proved me right. You proved that the world has people like that. And now because of you, because of all of us, there are going to be more. More what? More people who can't look away. More people who fight for what's right. More people who build families around shared purpose instead of shared blood. Destiny squeezed his hand. That's your real legacy, Mac. Not the wheelchairs you fixed. Not the system you changed. The people you inspired to be better than they thought they could be. Mac felt tears threatening again. He'd cried more in the past 6 months than in the previous 40 years of his life. I'm just a mechanic. No. Destiny's voice was fierce. You're so much more than that. And it's time you believed it. A knock at the garage door interrupted them. Reaper stood in the entrance, a smile on his face that Mac still wasn't used to seeing. Am I interrupting something? Just my daughter telling me I'm not allowed to be humble. She's right. Humility is overrated. Reaper walked toward them. I wanted to give you something. He pulled a small box from his pocket and handed it to Mac. Inside was a silver ring. Simple but solid. Engraved around the band were words that made Mac's breath catch. Family. Loyalty. Truth. It's a brotherhood ring, Reaper explained. Every full member gets one. They're not given lightly. I'm not a biker. No. You're something better. You're a man who does what's right no matter the cost. You're a man who fights for people who can't fight for themselves. You're a man who proves every single day that expertise is about caring, not credentials. Reaper's voice softened. You're my brother, Mac Washington. In every way that matters. And I want you to have proof of that. Mac slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly. Thank you. Don't thank me. Earn it. Keep doing what you do. Keep changing the world one wheelchair at a time. I plan to. Good. Reaper clapped him on the shoulder. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow we've got 3 new veterans coming in. Their equipment is garbage. They need you. Mac nodded. I'll be ready. After Reaper and Destiny left, Mac stood alone in his garage one last time. He looked at the wall of photographs, at Big Earl's dog tags, and Destiny's note, and the Brotherhood ring on his finger, at the tools that had become instruments of change, and the humble space that had become a sanctuary for suffering people. 6 months ago, he'd been broke and alone and forgotten. Now, he was part of something larger than himself. A movement that was changing how an entire nation treated its veterans. A family that had accepted him without condition. A legacy that would continue long after he was gone. He thought about his grandmother's words. God gave you hands that can heal machines. Don't you ever let fear stop you from using that gift. He hadn't let fear stop him. He'd faced down corporations and federal investigators and his own doubts. He'd turned down $2 million because some things mattered more than money. He'd built something from nothing because the alternative was watching people suffer in silence. And tomorrow, he would do it all again. Because that was who he was. That was what he did. That was the only way he knew how to live. Marcus Mac Washington turned off the lights in his garage and walked toward his truck. Behind him, 247 photographs watched from the wall. 247 faces smiling because someone had finally listened to them. 247 lives changed because a broke black mechanic in Detroit had decided that good enough would never be acceptable when it came to human suffering. The sign above the garage door caught the streetlight as Mac drove away. Washington Auto and Cycle. We fix what others can't. It had started as a desperate slogan from a failing business. Now it was a promise kept to an entire generation of forgotten veterans. Now it was the foundation of a movement that would reshape how America cared for its heroes. Now it was proof that one person with nothing but skill and heart and an absolute refusal to look away from suffering could change absolutely everything. Mac Washington had started with nothing but a failing garage and hands that could heal machines. He ended with a family, a legacy, and the knowledge that every single person who needed help deserved someone who would actually listen. That was his gift to the world, and the world would never be the same.